I am Pastor David Baxley, and I welcome you to join this video study of end time events and a verse-by-verse study of the book of Revelation. I invite you to follow along in this study and to email your questions to me. Email the questions to endtimesandrevelation@juno.com. This study is taken from my book, Understanding the Book of Revelation, and it will cover 25 video lessons. In this lesson, we're looking at Revelation chapter 15, the timeline. What's going on is hard to keep up with because everything is moving so fast from one scene to another. But John is able to keep the sequence and follow what he has shown. Remember, there are 3 sets of judgments given. Christ took the scroll, the title deed to earth, from his Father's hand and began to remove the 7 seals on the deed one at a time. Under each was a judgment. Under the last of the seals, angels with 7 trumpets were introduced, and as each one sounded their trumpets, a new judgment is given. Then as the 7th trumpet sounded, the final and worst of the judgments are introduced and shown as bowls pouring out these judgments. In the next chapters, as the angels pour these bowls of the last 7 plagues of judgment are being given as they move toward the very last part of the second half of the tribulation. This chapter is a pause between the introduction of the 7 bowls and the actual carrying out of those judgments. It's like God hit the pause button on his DVR. Revelation 15 verse 1. Then I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them the wrath of God is complete. John says he saw another sign and calls it great and marvelous. In chapter 12, John describes the signs of the woman clothed with the sun as great and marvelous. In chapter 12, verse 3, he calls the enormous red dragon just another sign. Here in verse 1, he calls the 7 angels with the 7 plagues great and marvelous, showing that these judgments are from God. These bowls are the 3rd and final judgment. The terrible harvest of chapter 14 was not the end, as it appeared to be. John now sees 7 angels with 7 last plagues, which will happen fast and will lead to the end, which John was given a preview of in chapter 14. Verse 2. And I saw something like a sea of glass mingled with fire, and those who have the victory over the beast, over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass, having harps of God. John is seeing the 144,000 standing in heaven on the sea that reflects the fire and torches around it. These witnesses have just come out of the fire of persecution on earth and are now making heavenly music. Verse 3. They sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and marvelous are your works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of the saints. The song that the 144,000 are singing is not really about Moses, nor really of the Lamb. It's a song that talks about the Lord God Almighty, about God's great divine justice and the deliverance that he brought to Moses as he led Israel from the Egyptians, and about raising Christ from the dead, and God sparing the saved from the judgments of earth at the rapture. Verse 4. Who shall not fear you, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy, for all nations shall come and worship before you, for your judgments have been manifested. This song puts the severe judgments that are coming into perspective, that they are divine, holy, and just judgments. Verse 5. After these things I looked, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven was open. John is seeing the temple open. This is not the temple of Solomon or of Herod, or even the temple rebuilt before the middle of the tribulation. It is compared to the tent used by Moses as a tabernacle, which contained the Ark of the Covenant. The open temple represents the presence of God revealed. Verse 6. And out of the temple came the 7 angels having the 7 plagues, clothed in pure bright linen, and having their chests girded with golden bands. Now these last and most severe of the judgments began. Verse 7. Then one of the 4 living creatures gives the 7 angels, full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. One of the 4 angels set aside for judgment gave to one of the 7 angels 7 golden bowls. Verse 8. The temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. The smoke represents the glory of God that completely filled the temple. No one could enter the temple until his divine judgments of God have been completed. At this point, no one will be saved. The ministry of the 2 witnesses have ended, and in these last very few weeks of the worst judgments that have ever come upon earth, Christ will come and end the judgment on earth by defeating Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet, along with all of the kings of the world and the evil government. Summary. This chapter is a pause between the trumpet judgments and the bowl judgments. The pause emphasizes the terrible nature of this judgment. It also shows that these terrible judgments are necessary to judge the great sins of the earth.